Morning and welcome everyone. Thank you all for joining us today for our special edition of Health Bytes for October. AI, artificial intelligence, has been such a hot topic lately, so I'm particularly excited about today's speakers. I'm pleased to welcome Elizabeth Gross and Henry Stokes that are with us today. Elizabeth A. Gross is the Associate Professor of Library Science and Technology at the Sam Houston State University. She has a BA in History and German from the Northern Michigan University, a master's degree in Library and Information Science, and a PhD in Learning Design and Technology from Wayne State University. Elizabeth is also a postdoctoral fellow for mechanical engineering at Kettering University. Her research interests include information needs of master's level and early career school librarians, perceptions of school librarianship, social justice in the school library, and artificial intelligence as a tool for librarians and library users. She's written several journal articles on the needs of students in higher education, as well as book chapters regarding distance education, AI for pre-service teachers, and how to help principals better understand and how to utilize the skills of school librarians. She's a member of the Texas Library Association, their Innovative and Technology Roundtable past chair, Texas Computers in Education Association, the International Association for School Librarians, and the American Society for Engineering Education. Also with us today is Henry Stokes. He's the Broadband Technology Coordinator at the Texas State Library and Archives Commission, where he's worked since August of 2008. He provides training and consulting for library staff across the state with a focus on broadband and emerging technologies. Henry's work is guided by his vision for Texas libraries as community technology hubs, and his passion for how libraries play a role in bringing both crucial digital literacy skills and the latest emerging technologies to their communities. So in today's Health Bytes, our speakers will be giving a presentation on The Future Will See You Now, AI for Healthcare, a Library's Perspective. Thank you so much, and I'll turn it over to Elizabeth and Henry.
Great, thank you so much, Katie. We're so excited to be here. This is The Future Will See You Now, AI for Healthcare, a Library's Perspective. And since we've had such great introductions, we'll skip that part. But today we're going to talk about a lot of stuff. So make yourself comfortable and you'll have the slides if you need to go back and look at things. And we're always available to chat more. But you can see here, generally, we're going to talk about AI and the newest advances that have happened, generative AI, and talk about the benefits briefly, talk about the criticism and concerns. That's all to give context to talk about how it affects jobs, healthcare, education, and libraries. So buckle up. Here we go with some final thoughts at the end. So AI, what just happened? Because a lot just happened. You know, it only started in November of 2022. So we're not even a year yet that the ChatGPT was launched, right? ChatGPT came out. And what's so different about ChatGPT? Well, it's not as new as we think. Of course, it's been around for a while now in our phone apps and our online maps and our smart speakers, and it's been collecting data all this time and being trained all this time. But what was so special about this last year is how it was released. It was democratized. Suddenly, everyone had access to it in a particular way and could see how amazing it was and what it could do. And seeing is believing, right? It's also very accessible. People who don't need coding to use it, and they could just immediately see what it can do. So as a result, there's been a mad scrambling across the board in every industry, all these companies investing in it, pouring money into it, trying to find ways to integrate it into their existing tools. And we've seen a lot happen in the time. Here's a timeline of just whatever we could throw in there as it was happening. And some stuff happened yesterday I couldn't even fit in here. So that's why you can see in October 2023, I have a placeholder. So just slide those in there for the last entry there.
2 hours.
Yeah, but just recently Google announced their own AI imaging tool, but we'll talk about all these. You know, this is just to show you how much has happened since November 2022. So we're going to talk about generative AI and specifically the two main types, just to give you, if you're new to this, you know kind of what we're talking about. I'm going to talk about text to image generators. This works where you just have a kind of a place to put in an entry of a prompt, right? So you type in a prompt, anything you want, and it will generate images for you. So for example, an astronaut riding a horse on the moon, or wild dogs giving themselves a selfie in the woods, avocado chairs, or strawberries, or my favorite weird sci-fi portraits. But anything you want, you throw it in there, and you can give it very specific details about, as much as you can in the prompt to help the AI deliver what it thinks you want. And you can see there's different versions of this. OpenAI, the same company that did ChatGPT, just does one called DALL-E 2 with 3 just around the corner. Midjourney, which requires Discord to use, plus Bing has one, Google has one. So lots happening there.
So text-based AI is what ChatGPT is. It was trained on large language models. In other words, it's looking across the internet basically to see how do humans put sentences together. So it really becomes a very fancy autocomplete. And these large language models are also what it's being trained on as well. When we use it, it's getting more data to be able to complete the sentences that you want. It's a pretty amazing thing to watch it happen, to be honest. So it really has a pattern detection. That's the algorithm. It's looking for how to provide you with your answer that you're looking for, and it does generate the text for you. Other examples that we found, and there are many more than this, barred by Google and OpenAI Playground. So what GPT stands for is down in the right-hand corner there. It really is a great predictor of the next word in the sentence. The applications of generative AI kind of know no bounds, actually. It can be used as a cognitive aid. Let's say you're looking at a blank page and you need to start writing. It can help you with that. It can help you kind of maybe not be creative, but get you to be creative and aid in productivity with all kinds of things we'll talk about in a minute. It will also help with communication, and it kind of gives predictions. So it's kind of been a very interesting road that we've seen as we've been working with AI ourselves.
It's kind of an all-purpose tool, it seems like. And we could spend a lot of time diving into all the different benefits,
really
but we want to share, we want to get through to the other, like healthcare and some of these other things.
Yeah.
But first, let's talk about the criticisms and concerns, because I think the benefits are being discussed a lot, but we want to make sure we cover these. So, it's been trained on the internet, the toxic repository that is the internet. You're putting in, they say garbage in, garbage out. The outputs are only as good as the inputs. So you're putting in all this data. It's all it's got to work with. It's all North American data. It generates generally a very white world with a bias against women. Who was it who were the trainers? Was it an open group? No, it was just specific people figuring out the algorithms. It's dated. So, keep that in mind as we're moving through. This is not at all a perfect system. Some other criticisms, concerns, with art especially, but even the writing, it can steal the work of others, just pulling directly from people. And there's already lawsuits in progress. There's already programs out there that are attempting to help watermark or keep art from being taken from it. One of the biggest deals right now is that it hallucinates. That's what they call it, when it gives you just completely made up from a fictional world information. And it does it a lot. And some of this has dangerous consequences, like, helping to enable eating disorders, defaming people. There's some lawsuits there where they're just saying really terrible things about people that aren't true, so on and so forth. So we talked about the outdated info. There's also the lack of transparency. How are people using this data? They're training on us, but what does that mean? And Elizabeth, this cheating on assignments in schools, we're seeing that.
Yeah, it's kind of like you can say, I have to write an essay about XYZ, and it'll give you an essay on XYZ, and it'll be the exact formula that an essay takes, so that it looks like and feels like, smells like an essay, but it hasn't been created by a human.
It's been used as a tool to challenge library books. Like, generate a list of the books I should ban. It's super easy to hack, right? Yeah. You can get around you try to put make it so that people can't generate bad things, but it's easy to get around that.
Yep. Yep. So I thought you'd be interested in this. This is a question on the US MLE, and what it's talking about here is the notion that if I asked ChatGPT something today, it might not return the same answer today as it will in a couple of months, because again, it's training on a dynamic set of data, which is our use of it, our interactions with it. So you can see that it did fairly well in March on GPT-4, but it by June, it wasn't doing as well. And then ChatGPT 3.5 never really did rise much above 50% here, you can see. So N equals 340. In other words, there were 340 different times that it was run through this. So these authors actually want to interact with people. It's a preprint, and they've been on X, Twitter, talking about it. And I think it's really, really important for us to reach out to authors who are doing these types of things to let them know that this is really useful information for us as educators and as librarians.
Right. And it comes up with different things each time. So you
Yep.
can never, there's no consistency, you never know what to get. It can be used, especially, in all ways, both the generative AI art and the generative text AI for misinformation. It can be used very effectively in spamming and phishing and scamming in getting people to give up all their money. And one of the biggest issues is because it's so good at imitating things, people can over rely on its authority. So you can believe an image of the Pentagon, for example, having a bomb threat or having a bomb explode, or you can believe that the Pope had his fancy jacket or whatever. People don't. I mean, we've always had Photoshop, of course, but now it's even easier for anybody to generate these images, and they look better than Photoshop many times. So there's just a general idea of that we're rushing into this so fast, like, Wile E. Coyote off the cliff, and we're not really paying attention that there's no ground beneath us. What does it mean for our security, for our privacy? And what does it mean for big tech power consolidation? This Joldi Estrin wrote about the idea that, it's not so much the AI as it is the people who are what they're prioritizing around it. Human well-being and dignity should be our North Star, with the innovation is the supporting thing for human well-being and dignity. So should we be rushing in the way that we have? And how does it affect jobs? So taking another look at this, we actually think it does automate tasks, sure, but it's probably not going to cause problems with jobs. In fact, it might even revitalize the workforce, because the jobs that are replaced will be ones that there'll be more jobs, and there'll be ones that people are using AI to do them, that people will have a chance to upskill, suddenly get jobs that they couldn't before. Everyone gets a promotion. And those that, of course, it's raising productivity, and it's giving the least skilled a chance to accomplish the same skills as those that are, more have more experience. So it's decreasing the performance gap. But those that have more experience can then broaden their experience and get more specialized skills and move to areas of jobs where there are jobs. So we don't necessarily think that it's a bad thing there.
Right. One of the things that I've been reading about, because my background is in learning design and technology, how does this affect instructional designers? And a lot of people are saying, oh, AI is going to take our job. But really, you have to have the understanding of human needs and people's personas and experiences and empathy to be able to write those types of lessons. AI can't do that. So, we keep an eye on it, but I think that's what's going to end up happening, is that we're going to see these gaps. And that's where humans are going to shine, because that's what we do best.
Okay, so what about healthcare, right? We're going to have a little mini presentation inside this one.
Right.
These are the areas where we're going to talk about the benefits of things. And a lot of this comes from this great source, Future Today's Institute, the 2023 Tech Potential Report. So take a look at that, because they did a wonderful job, and they do that every year, looking at the most current things. So one of the things this generative AI in particular, is going to speed up it's going to speed up scientific progress, right? It's going to be able to help the development of new vaccines, new medicines, new antibodies, better than humans can, faster than humans can. So that's going to make huge impact. It's going to predict protein folding. So, faster than humans, determining the shape and function it's much faster, it's much more accurate. We use that in research on cancer and antibiotic resistance and vaccine pharmaceutical development. So those two areas right there, antibody design and protein folding, are going to have huge impact on things, scientific discovery.
Yeah, and that has been distributed, the protein folding, that has been distributed since at least 2004. So now to be able to use a powerful tool like AI may really change our landscape.
Yeah, and we have this huge gap too. We're talking about jobs. There's a 3 million person gap there. So what if we could train the generative AI to be a new healthcare bot workforce? Now, of course, we can't launch into this like we talked about right away. And so that's why efforts are underway to figure out how to address issues like, well, they can't swear to ethical codes and they're giving out false info. Both very bad things to overcome.
Especially in the medical field.
Yeah. So what we learned about is they're training them with human feedback, right? They're actually testing them just like you would humans for bedside manner, making sure they can pass certifications, and then not doing everything at once, doing things in phases. So cross your fingers and maybe this will work to have this new AI workforce in healthcare.
Support, exactly. So these things are kind of straightforward. One of the things that it can do is, you can take I'm going to talk to my patient about this. What do you think? Or give me a negative. What do you hear that sounds negative? And it will actually analyze what you're saying and give you some information, which would be a great way to train one's own self on bedside manner. As well as medical text, being able to simplify that for the lay public, the highlights of medical papers, that's already happening. So there are quite a few different aspects where it can be a powerful tool for clinicians.
Yeah, just kind of really giving healthcare workers even better, being able to provide better user experience for their patients and helping them synthesize and more efficiently do their jobs. And this idea of, what about talk therapy? Well, again, it can improve it. So you've got all this dialogue. That's what talk therapy is. That could be data, and you can quantify linguistic interactions, right? And sort of figure out what's working the best.
Yes, because again, it can summarize. It can read the dialogue, let's say, and tell you, well, this is what I summarized it to be, and the therapist can see whether that is something that makes sense to them or however they'd like to use it. But it is a tool that can be used that way.
And if you've got recordings, you can even have the AI look at the digital voice prints and figure out what are the sentiments and how does that play a role in therapy. So definitely seeing some ways that this can improve talk therapy. And we, thinking about Star Trek and how amazing that is that they can scan somebody, but, and get all this info. But that's kind of what we're talking about here. It's just, there's a lot of, imagine if all that data can be analyzed behind the scenes by AI right away, pulling in things like demographics, family patient history, vital signs, lab results. So imagine if that's just right at their fingertips, and it's happening before the patient goes through certain procedures. So healthcare workers can actually determine things right away. Does the patient have certain diseases? Do they have certain risks for negative outcomes? And then as a result, know whether, they might need to be readmitted to the hospital soon after being discharged. We need to make these certain interventions and extra care. Oh, we can see what the course of a disease will be, what best treatments could work for that specific patient.
So these are some of the outcomes for the patient that we would like to see if it really becomes a reality. But you can read through them.
It's just a better experience overall.
Yeah, the bottom line to reduce burnout might really be a reason to pursue this more intentionally.
Right. So some major issues that will be really good to address and could even save lives.
Mm-hmm.
But as Elizabeth mentioned before, the human element is still so important. The human support system, you can't the McNamara fallacy. You can't make decisions based entirely on metrics and data, right? You're not getting the full picture. You're not taking in empathy, intuition. So we're not talking here about anything about eliminating humans. This is all just an extra tool for humans to use to help each other.
Right. These are some of the things that have come up lately. I don't know how it is in practice, but these are some of the statements and results that have been shared really lately, especially the last bullet, no need for radiologists. It's kind of an interesting conundrum because you would think that would be very important, but they are trying to certify again to operate independently. So we'll see how that goes.
There's also this issue, I just bring it up because it could be really, it's already starting. You could have a medical deepfake. You could have someone hacking into a hospital system and putting in generated fake x-rays or data. So that's something to be really aware of, that we're going to have to watch out for that. And then, we talk about smart homes, right? Smart speakers, well, smart hospitals, smart care facilities, having the whole space be, in bed, have its sensors everywhere, have monitoring systems, have wearables, so that they're all kind of keeping track of how the patient's doing, how often people are washing their hands, how often, preventing falls. And then this is fun, self-driving microscopes, this idea of microscopy, how does it say it? With deep learning, smart microscopes viewing and analyzing samples right at the same time. So it's getting the data from itself and then immediately knowing what it sees and analyzing it. So that's going to have a huge impact on scientific discovery. Boy, these are just a few other things that we couldn't leave out because they're so interesting.
Right.
Natural language process, NLP, these are AI algorithms, but they're being used in an interesting way to develop vaccines and prevent new viral spreads. So, NLP is something where words and sentences are parsed and manipulated, but they can actually use that same technique on protein sequences and genetic codes. And then as a result, interpret changes in viruses. So really neat.
Yeah.
And then, looking at an example of that's actually really good about removing bias in patient care, if you can actually look at the history of patient care, you can see that, for example, care is based on how a patient assesses their own pain. Well, data from the National Institutes of Health found that the pain of Black patients is underscored. So what if we went through that and we saw that the original system is riddled with bias? We come up with a new system using the trained deep learning models and finding those gaps and ensuring that every patient gets addressed and assessed the correct way.
Right.
It's being used in medical surgical simulation and in AI-directed acupuncture. So just a few more examples in there.
Yeah.
So what about education? Let's launch into that.
So I just got back from an information literacy conference, and that's kind of my life lesson of the month. Information literacy is super important because it develops those critical thinking skills that people can say, wow, this isn't really, what this AI generated isn't really very useful or helpful or even true. So it could incentivize people to use the internet so that they can actually go out and see for themselves what's real. AI models don't know truth. They just know how to complete a sentence really, really well in a way that you're going to expect it to. So that it would be another way to promote information literacy and critical thinking, because then people can actually say, yeah, that's a hallucination. That doesn't exist in the real world. So what we're thinking is that the authoritative source goes back to the user instead of it being, oh, I found this on the internet or in a database, or look, here's a photo that proves it. They can actually rely on their own critical thinking skills to decipher whether that's a truth or not. Some of the things that were really interesting earlier on was that ChatGPT could pass the bar exam. Remember, that's very formulaic. All these things are very formulaic, and it does really well on things like that. In essays, same thing. It'll give you another prompt even when you and another essay, even when you give it the same prompt. So it's almost almost impossible to spot. Although I will say sometimes it's fairly flat. I wonder if people could really tell if they were reading that it's AI generated. So one of the things that has been happening is that people are all up in arms and want to block it, but it's already here. That's not going to happen. So we really need to know how to deal with it head on. So the thing that it does not do is build critical thinking and problem solving skills. We have to leave that to teachers and librarians. And really the only goal is to create sentences and paragraphs that make sense. It is very super formulaic. What's interesting to me is that, if you are an attorney, you can have it fill out all your boilerplate forms that you have to do, and then, check it for accuracy so that is completely taken off your plate. And that would be something the attorney does. You can't even really shouldn't give that to someone else. So the bottom line is that it's going to force teachers to teach in a different way. We can't use those kinds of things that are what we've always ever done. We have to think ahead. So we want to make education better, and this will help us, actually force us to do the things that we already know work well with student engagement and student-centered learning. So I really like the phrase pedagogy before technology. We want to make sure that what we're doing involves the process of learning and not the product, which kind of goes against all the whole grading schema and everything like that. It helps students do some really interesting critical thinking about reviewing things that AI has generated. And since there's not a person there aren't going to be any hurt feelings. I mean, it can really help teachers create products that the students can then interact with and make sense of. So the other thing that we are going to talk about a little bit more is prompt engineering. And that is, how do you create something and then input it into generative AI to get something out that is meaningful? So the couple of the other things that we think are great is to be able to paraphrase documents for ESL students so that they can understand them. You can even translate from a different language, which is amazing. Here are some more educational opportunities. I think it would be great if there were an AI that could help teachers, like a universal basic intern. In other words, here's this other presence in the room that can help with group work and generate personalized lesson plans in a timely manner, because a lot of that is really tough. So it also can be a writing coach, guidance counselor, all those kinds of things under the tutelage of the teacher. We can't give it, those kinds of things, because again, it doesn't have emotions. It doesn't have empathy. It can create things pretty nicely, but it isn't really the teacher. It can never become the teacher, and at least not yet.
But it can add this extra level of support for a student, just like with a patient, this extra level of why do I need to learn this, for example?
Yep.
The AI can have a conversation with a student and actually make those connections for them.
Right. There are also programs out there that incorporate that right on the screen, so that if the student is already asking that question, it's there. So this is another way it can assist. This is Sal Khan, who put together Khan Academy, and he also has something called Khanmigo. So that is incorporating AI into the use for teachers, so that they can come up with lesson plans and all kinds of differentiated instruction with very little time involved. This is a sample of a generated AI generated lesson plan. It's for third graders, and it's simple machines, and the standards are the national standards. It went out and found those. The National School Library Standards are in the next column. And this is kind of small print, but one of the ways that I can show you that what it does is, when it talks about learning styles, visual learners, that's kind of a folk myth. But because it is so popular on the internet, it's giving you answers for visual learners, kinesthetic learners, even though we know that there isn't any evidence that that exists. So that's kind of an obvious thing to me, that it's just regurgitating what it finds in novel ways.
But it could still speed up your process, right?
Sure.
Yeah. You just have to know what you're doing when you go through it and make the changes.
Right. So when I was at ESIL, I listened to someone who was from the former communist bloc, and she said, one of the things you have to do with AI is trust but verify. And so what she did, or what this person did, Jessica Kale from Pepperdine, this summer had her students do some background reading. She teaches science communications and science writing. And so she had them do some background reading in their area, their topic of interest. Then they had ChatGPT write them an essay. So now ChatGPT has done the essay writing. The students went back and just went through it and said, yes, I will use this. Anything that was in green shows that that's something that's verifiable and trustworthy. The things that were yellow were like, oh, there's a problem with this. It's kind of right, but not really. And then all the red that you see are the ones that say absolutely no go. And this was just one summer session. So, I mean, they didn't need a ton of instruction to be able to realize right away whether it was, truthful and verifiable or not.
So what an amazing lesson of the kinds of things they're learning about here.
Right.
And they're going to apply this now to what they do in the future, but useful skills.
Yep. These are just different apps that people have put together. Elicit analyzes research papers. Research Rabbit, I haven't had a chance to get it to work for me, but what its idea is kind of a visual map of related research papers, people who maybe are related authors. So person authored on this paper, authored on other papers, and that would really help in terms of background research for areas that I know I am researching in. So I would like to see that something like that work, because that would save me a lot of time to be able to get that information. So other ones are DFIT, that's like leveled material for teachers and students, and it will write lesson plans and give assessments and all kinds of things like that. Canva Pro has a magic write. You tell it what you're wanting to write in your presentation and it'll fill it in for you. And then also Bing gives answers with citations, but you always have to verify what you're seeing with that.
So what about libraries? How does this affect our industry? I had to include this. This is McKinney Public Library here in Texas has actually gotten library robot helpers that move around the floor and help with reshelving books. And of course, it's a big hit with the community, and the kids followed around like a mascot. So here's some areas where we think libraries really play a huge role in this. You know, we talk about the digital divide already. Well, AI just being another divide that's going to be created in our society, and how the library plays a role in bridging that and helping train the community, get the community ready for this new, hugely impactful technology to change our lives. So they often play a role, and they have since the beginning, in showcasing technology. And in the Netherlands, they're actually ahead of us here, because they've already got an AI parade initiative, speaking of parades, where they're going across to 35 libraries and offering debates, workshops, exhibitions, reaching over 1 million people, just talking about AI and getting everybody kind of ready. So I love to see that happening in the libraries. And they think of libraries as the perfect place, this coalition that started it. This is a great place for this to happen. But AI itself as a tool, the generative AI in particular, can have a huge impact in library staff. Just allow, we were often told, simply do more with less, right? With money, with time. Now in some ways you can, right? It's similar to other technologies like that we've had to automate our catalogs, for example, get self-checkout, get volunteers to help, get, ways that free up the library staff time for us to do more things that we actually want to do.
Right. I'm thinking of my students. A couple of them have already said they've been using it to create newsletters for their school libraries because it's a solo practitioner and they have all the work. So this at least gives them back some time that they can use to be able to create communications with their parents and students. So that's another thing we're seeing here. We think of that the idea of market data is a great idea, be able to understand the needs of the population more quickly and prioritize those services. And also, of course, make the social media posts for job and career readiness. We're thinking that that is something that I can see a librarian helping a patron with, to be able to write those cover letter and cover letter drafts so that the user can actually work on something that's already been created and make it their own, and tailor a resume for a specific job description, which, it's been automated on the employer side for a really long time. Now maybe the prospective employee can claw back some of that power to be able to tell what it is they can actually do for that company.
And this is a big place with AI divide, where I think you start to see people getting jobs because they're better at using prompt engineering to create their. Now you can do it wrong, and we've seen that, of course, where people can tell that you used it, and that's not what we're talking about. But if you know how to do it right, then I think you do a better job of getting a job.
Again, we're talking about hallucinations before. They really, AI really has a reputation for this, and maybe the new branding for libraries is we don't hallucinate. We can give you the true answer, and research and reference can support the search rather than give what it thinks you want. So what a couple of the things, and this has happened, we did a presentation, and after we stayed on, and group of librarians asked it for something really inane. It was like a chicken enchilada recipe. Well, it gave it, but then they wanted to know where did that come from, and it made up a cookbook that it found it in. So it's just trying to please you, like that golden retriever. It's going to bring what it thinks you want. So the last point: consider apps like UChat and Perplexity provide links to sources. That makes it easier to verify accuracy as well.
We may see, or we are already seeing this idea of it being a tool that you could subscribe to. A library, can provide this to their patrons or faculty or students as a service. So you've got curated prompts that go with it, and it pulls in its data. Maybe it limits its data source, and it safeguards it, so you have a sort of more protective tool, as opposed to just using the open web that's from 2021, because they haven't updated it yet.
Right.
So we'll see that.
So now this is another way that we can focus on information literacy. In my recent studies, it sounds like people don't really know how to define information needs. So this might be a way to kind of slow everything down and say, okay, help the student find out what it is I actually need to know. And that might be a very interesting way for us to use it, and then to teach the writing and researching in different ways, based on the fact that you have this like assistant, this universal basic intern assistant for the student, so that they can actually learn the process in a more personalized way. And again, about the use in the library, we'd like to see it for collection development, but the LLM is so old that it's really not that useful. Plus, the more you pick it, it's going to show the same few popular titles. It's not going to really be thoughtful or come up with, the long tail, in other words, to be able to find things that might be of interest to patrons, but isn't very well known. And I think right now there are better options elsewhere, which are below there.
Yeah, and reader advisory. There are some great tools for that, though.
Yeah,
that you can employ.
So another thing, be able to decide what language level, reading level that you're looking for. Who is your audience, and then explain it to that person. And then we'd like to see some things like if we could build an API that would look into the the ILS and see where are most people, drawing things from, and where are most things coming from, and, which catalogs are being used the most, and be able to search the catalog in new ways with using, AI.
It's pretty great at grant writing, just as you can imagine. It knows if you may not need to hire a grant writer, but you just need to be able to look at what it's written and make sure that everything's accurate.
Right. I just saw something this morning that said AI makes a mockery of grant writing. So you're on point, Henry. It's just really interesting. But again, we have to verify the facts.
That's a very specialized skill, but that's kind of what this is good at.
Yep, exactly.
So, and then some really interesting things happening with digital preservation and archiving. So, for example, generative AI of preserving the fading natural world, or creating cultural artifacts that are maybe lost, extinct animals, enhancing our collective memory, and then curating those or preserving them and archiving them. So lots of efforts going on in those areas too.
Yep.
So we'll have a few minutes for questions, but we wanted to give just the final thoughts to sort of wrap everything up.
Yep. Go ahead.
So I guess what we would say is, don't be afraid of this. Explore, experiment with it. There's so many great, cool developments happening. And the more that we have the right kind of people working on it, the better. Stay informed. And, you're the liaison to your communities. So teach those skills, the AI literacy skills, to close those divides. And just sort of in general, all this is sort of what library staff are always trying to do, which is find ways to better connect with one another, remove barriers to access, help our communities generate and tell their stories. All these things we're already doing, but it's just apply this to AI, empower those specific populations that have been typically shut out and are harmed by technology, and help them make it their own, right? And then lastly, question the tools and people shaping them, find ways to protect one another. And I say this because it's so straightforward, but it's so simple, but it really makes a huge difference. Teach patrons about privacy and security.
Yeah.
Because that's kind of what we need to do to protect ourselves and prevent dystopia. All these things I've listed here. If we could just do all of them, we're done. We're good.
Yeah.
Not a utopia, but maybe we can stave off the end of the world a little bit sooner. All right. Well, thank you so much, everybody. And I know we have just a few minutes here, but I know there's lots of comments and questions which we're excited to dig into maybe after the session. But do our moderators have any questions that they've seen that they would like to bring up?
Please.
Or we can wrap it up and answer your questions offline too.
Yeah, that's true.
We had several questions in the chat. It's been very, very active.
Good.
Try and scroll back through some of these. Unfortunately, I don't think we'll be able to get to all of these, so I'm just going to go with some of the most recent ones. So someone asked, what is your perspective on the need to preserve important knowledge with companies and people using or creating knowledge bases? Does AI eliminate this need?
Oh, I don't think so. What do you think, Henry? I think that's really basic need. I don't think that's going to be something that can
and support that for
Yep.
I don't think it replaces too many things. It's just maybe some positions will have to change how they go about it.
And then a couple people were asking, there's some chatbots that use the open web and not just up to 2021. Is that correct?
I think so. I think that's true. This ChatGPT was the one we were referencing.
And we may not know everything too. Things happen so fast. It's sometimes hard to keep up with. It seems like every week. So if, we maybe have to be corrected there.
Yeah. Sometimes I feel like I'm running with the bulls. I'll tell you why, because it's just everything everywhere. It's happening so fast.
You're having a book that's they're rushing the publication of it, right?
Yes, they are. That's exactly right. Yeah, that started in June and edits are due for the finals on the 25th of this month. So I've never had a book chapter go that fast. So, and this is
got to get out there. So this stuff's happening like in the schools with education. It's just people are leading the way and figuring this out as as the plane is flying.
Yep, exactly.
There was some discussion too around this question is how would we as teachers ensure that students aren't using AI?
Ensure that they're not. Well, then you have to think about your deliverable that you're asking them to give you. This is my take. It's that you're asking them to give you that has to be personalized to them. It has to be something that only they can have an opinion on, or that has meaning for something that is tied back to something that you already know about that student, or it's something that is a group project, or it's that has pieces from different people. I've tried to think about it in a lot of different ways, but I think the thing is that we can't think about something that happens behind closed doors. I think you really have to look to see what other people are doing and then see what works in your particular area. I know that's very vague, but I teach school librarianship, so the things that I am doing are all project-based. They may be able to get away with it, but I have so few students that I think I have the time to actually look at them. So my area is not really, replicable for a lot of people, especially like those basic courses, 600 people in your class or something like that.
And you kind of touched on this earlier, garbage in, garbage out, but what do you think of the risk for malicious social influence? We might not realize we feel a certain way about an issue or political candidate.
It's a big concern. I mean, we have to think about how this information is being manipulated. We already have to worry about information literacy, and combat it. So yeah, I think it's just so much easier to communicate now with each other and generate whatever we want, with false information which appears truthful when it's not. Yeah, it does make worse than those things.
Right. I think I read something today that there's, I don't know if this is Congress or who would be the governing body, but there is a movement afoot to say if something is generated by AI, you need to call it. I don't know how you would tell. That's almost like the honor system. So we're back to square one as far as I'm concerned. But there is, that is a recognized issue.
Which just emphasizes the role of libraries.
Yes, I agree.
I'm scrolling back through chat. I missed one earlier and I want to make sure that I got to it. So someone mentioned that their like a kind of fundamental fear is people keep citing resources that replace people with saying that replacing people with AI is a bad idea, and giving reasons for why it won't happen. But our healthcare system is built on things that are a bad idea, that make profits, marginally higher profits with insurance companies and for investment companies. So why do we think that this will be any different than medical billing or reducing nurse to patient ratios?
It's a really good
I
question.
don't think it will be any different, to be honest with you. I think we have to, and I know that's not something you want to hear. And my daughter's a physician, so I completely understand this. I don't see physicians really advocating for themselves because they're too darn busy. They just have too much work to do. And so I guess it's the public that's going to have to come back and say, this isn't acceptable. And I don't know if there will be a groundswell or not. It kind of remains to be seen, but I agree with you. The profit is always like the king, but as Henry had said earlier, we need to focus on what's good for human dignity, and that should be why we're doing what we're doing. It is the reason. I don't know though. I'm sorry.
Someone also mentioned archive strategies. Is the National Archive planning to capture the algorithms or databases as AI develops?
That's a good question.
Yeah, we don't know. That's a good question, though. It's an interesting.
Yes, very interesting. Yep. It would behoove us to have that.
And then a couple people were asking, and they've shared resources on the chat on this as well. But do you have any suggestions about where we can go to get more educated on AI?
Well, in the AI resources, the very first thing down there, that's just a working document. I haven't added to it recently because we've been putting it into the PowerPoint. So it's kind of all at your fingertips, just not all in the same place. Those are kind of an eclectic mix of different things that I found, starting out with a MOOC from Finland that they made public that can teach you about how AI actually works. And it has quite a few different resources and things like that. So I think I would start with the Finland one if you really wanted to get into it. But also there's a man, Ethan Mallink, who's been blogging and writing about AI. And I found a lot of great, not only information, but also opinions about the future of AI that I think has been really helpful, at least for me. Henry, what do you think?
There's that MIT newsletter that we really like.
Yes, that's right.
Download.
Yep,
Yeah,
that
look
one
into
too.
that. They do a great job of keeping you sort of up to date with any. I read that and then it's like, okay, put that in the presentation. Put that in. Here we go.
Yep.
We've been updating versions of this since April. So
Yeah, and I don't feel like I'm ahead of it at all.
no.
I think we have time for like maybe one or two more questions. This is another one that came in. Since ChatGPT only included information from open repositories, doesn't it prevent access to paid information and does not properly reference important content?
Very true.
Yeah, good point.
Yeah, it doesn't give attribution or the correct attribution all the time. Let's put it that way.
You got to know its limits, and people need to be educated about that and know where it's useful and what to use it for. It's just there's a big learning curve here for people, and we're seeing that with all the lawsuits and the defamation and some people think it should have liability insurance.
Yeah, that's right. And the other thing too is like with our presentation back in April, I just thought, well, I'm going to ask ChatGPT to give me 10 catchy titles for our presentation. And I'll tell you what, Henry had a better title. So it really, when you look at what it does, and then actually like, how does this feel? How does this land? Maybe it can help, but sometimes it's just kind of like, okay, thank you, but it didn't really.
Yeah, I don't like using I've looked at so much AI art that I find it I can tell right away most of the time. And I don't like, that's why I didn't use that to put into our presentation, except for that one slide, because I can tell, and I think other people will too. And I think people will start to see they'll notice the difference and they'll appreciate human created art more. That's what I think will happen.
Yeah. Folks, we have cut so much. So I'm thinking about all the stuff we didn't say that we've said other times. Oh my gosh, it's just so much. It just is so much crazy.
Thank you so much for your presentation. People were sharing some wonderful resources in this, and I put them in the Google Doc, and I'll share that out with people too. But I really enjoyed this presentation. I think it was fantastic. I apologize if I haven't gotten to your questions. Feel free to email us at NNLM Region 3 at UNTHSC. We're happy to pass any questions that we didn't get to along. But thank you again so much for.
Thanks for watching. This video was produced by the network of the National Library of Medicine. Select the circular channel icon to subscribe to our channel, or select a video thumbnail to watch another video from the channel.